there's a moment you never admit to anyone. Not your friends, not your parents, not even the version of yourself you pretend to be online. It happens early, often silently, and always with the same eerie familiarity. You wake up, open your eyes, and feel nothing. No drive, no hunger, no determination. Just a still, airless emptiness pressing against your chest like someone quietly removed the engine that used to power you. It lasts a few seconds, then a few minutes. And then, disturbingly, it begins to feel normal. That's when the panic hits. Because deep down you know you promised yourself something yesterday. You set a goal. You made new rules. You swore a new version of yourself into existence. But now you're lying there, staring at the ceiling, realizing that the person you needed to become did not show up this morning. You hope the feeling will pass. It doesn't. You hope the spark will return. It won't. You hope motivation will kick in any second. It never does. And the cruel part is, you blame yourself. You assume you're weak, undisciplined, broken, someone who simply lacks motivation, as if that's a personal flaw. But what if the flaw isn't yours? What if you were taught the wrong approach from the start? Here's the uncomfortable twist, the part most people never want to face. The problem isn't your laziness. The problem is your dependence on motivation itself. That's the backstory you've been living without realizing it. A lifetime built on a single fragile emotional state. A state that was never designed to carry the weight of your ambitions. And now, you're starting to feel the consequences. That's where this story begins. Not with a heroic journey, not with triumphant change, but with the quiet realization that something foundational inside you is breaking. To understand why, you have to step outside your world for a moment and into a culture that solved this issue centuries before you were born. Because while modern self-help tells you to get motivated, ancient Japan built its entire psychological, spiritual, and warrior philosophy around the exact opposite idea. Motivation is unreliable. Duty is unbreakable. This is where Yamato Damashii, the Japanese spirit, enters the story. But we're not there yet, not fully. There's still a slow unraveling that needs to happen, a peeling back of layers to reveal why this mindset existed at all. You can't understand Yamato Damashii without understanding the emotional soil it grew from. Imagine it. You're living in a society where the day's survival doesn't care about your feelings. Rice must be planted whether you're sad or inspired. The community must be protected whether you're tired or energized. Honor must be upheld whether your heart is full or empty. In that world, waiting for motivation would be suicide, so they built something stronger. Here's a small breadcrumb. The first hint of the deeper mystery. The Japanese had a word for the state you fall into when you rely on feelings. Muen, drifting disconnection, a life without anchor. But they also had its cure. Giri, duty, obligation, responsibility that exists independently of emotion. This is the beginning of a psychological architecture completely foreign to the modern world. One where your feelings have no say in whether the task gets done. Not because emotions don't matter, but because duty matters more. And as you start absorbing that idea, something else becomes clear. Maybe you're not flawed. Maybe your strategy is. Tomorrow's version of you will not be saved by motivation. It will be built by something older, harder, cleaner, more inevitable. Duty. You've been taught since childhood that successful people wake up with fire in their eyes. That they're driven, passionate, overflowing with unstoppable ambition. But deep down, you know that's not your daily reality. And here's the unsettling secret, it's not theirs either. Most days, even the people you admire don't feel motivated. They don't magically wake up eager to conquer the world. They don't live in a constant state of inspiration. They simply learned something you didn't. They don't need motivation to act. But how did they learn that? And why is this understanding so rare outside certain cultures? This is where the slow burn begins, the careful layering of truths that gradually shift your entire worldview. Let's start with a strange observation. Have you noticed how some people, the quiet ones, the consistent ones, never talk about motivation at all? They don't spend time trying to psych themselves up. They don't chase inspirational videos. They don't create aesthetic routines or dramatic self-improvement montages. Instead, they move through the world with an eerie steadiness, as if their actions come from somewhere deeper than emotion. Their behavior is a breadcrumb, a clue, a hint that there is another way to live. You see it in the athlete who trains in the rain, not because they want to, but because that's the day's work. You see it in the soldier who advances not because he feels brave, but because the mission requires it. You see it in the craftsman who shapes wood at dawn with the same calm intensity he had yesterday and the day before that. These people's lives are built on something more constant than motivation, something that does not collapse when their mood collapses. That something is the first shadow of Yamato Damashii. But let's slow the pace even more. You need to understand the emotional architecture Japanese culture is built upon, because it's strikingly different from what you grew up with. Modern Western mindset is built on feelings. How do I feel today? Am I inspired? Do I have energy? Am I motivated? Traditional Japanese mindset was built on roles and responsibilities. What must be done today? What is my duty here? What is required of me? What honor must I uphold? You can already feel the shift, can't you? One system relies on emotion, the other system relies on identity. And here's the micro mystery that should stop you for a second. If your identity is tied to someone who acts, then acting becomes automatic. If your identity is tied to someone who waits for motivation, then waiting becomes your entire life. Here's where the story darkens slightly, just a shade, nothing dramatic yet. In ancient Japan, especially during the feudal and samurai eras, people didn't have the luxury to collapse emotionally. Survival didn't pause for bad days. Responsibility didn't wait for inspiration. Your village didn't stay safe because you were feeling off. Your duty wasn't negotiable, and your feelings were not the center of the universe. This created a collective psychology centered on giri, duty, and its deeper spiritual counterpart, Yamato Damashii, the Japanese spirit. One day, a historical chronicler wrote something chilling. A man does what is required not because he wishes to, but because not doing so would betray the soul. That's another breadcrumb. Keep it with you. Now here comes the subtle twist. While you've spent your life asking, how can I feel more motivated? The Japanese were asking, how can I strengthen my spirit so that duty becomes effortless? Because here's the hidden truth motivation never tells you. If you rely on motivation, you will always need motivation. If you rely on duty, you will always act on with or without desire. We need one more layer before Yamato Damashii fully takes shape. You need to understand the emotional consequences of relying on motivation. Because this part is usually invisible until someone names it. When your actions depend on your mood, you become a hostage of your own psychology. You can't predict who you'll be tomorrow. You can't trust yourself under pressure. You can't rely on your own intentions, and that uncertainty eats you alive. Think of the last time you wanted to change your life. The excitement was real, the vision was real, the plan was real. But somewhere between your intention and your action, a gap opened, and that gap was filled with feelings. Too tired, too stressed, too overwhelmed, too uninspired, too unmotivated. Feelings that evaporated your forward motion. But Yamato Damashii is built on a different internal infrastructure. One where feelings are acknowledged, but never allowed to intervene. You're starting to see why this mindset made motivation irrelevant. Yet we're not at the emotional twist yet, that's still coming. For now, understand this. Duty is not a burden in Japanese philosophy. It is an anchor, it is identity, it is clarity, it is freedom from the chaos of emotion. And once you live from duty instead of motivation, a strange thing happens. You stop negotiating with yourself. You stop collapsing under mood swings. You stop waiting for the right moment. You stop living in emotional turbulence. You simply act. That's the beginning of Yamato Damashii. There's a story the Japanese rarely tell outright, but it shows up in their behavior, in their traditions, in the way their society produces people who move with quiet inevitability. It's not dramatic, it's not glamorous, it doesn't make for a viral motivational reel. But it explains something most people never understand about true discipline. It begins with an ordinary scene. A Japanese carpenter kneels before a piece of raw timber early in the morning. The workshop is still, the light barely touching the wood surface. He bows, not because he's being theatrical, not because someone's watching, but because this is how he anchors himself to the day. Then he picks up his tools and begins. There's nothing heroic in this. No inspiration, no adrenaline, no motivational speech echoing in his brain. Just the work, just the duty, just the quiet agreement between him and the craft he has committed his life to. Here's the micro-mystery buried inside that scene. Why does a man who feels no motivation still move with such calm certainty? Because his identity doesn't depend on how he feels. It depends on what he does and what he must do. In Japanese thought, action defines the self, not emotion. In Western thought, emotion defines the self and action follows only when emotion permits it. This is the gap, the psychological canyon. That explains why you struggle while others move forward effortlessly. You're trying to feel your way into action. They're acting their way into identity. Let's deepen this. There is an old Japanese concept, shokunin kishitsu. It means the craftsman's spirit, the pride and meaning a person finds through mastering their role in society. A shokunin doesn't wait for inspiration to do his work. He becomes the kind of person who does the work, regardless of internal weather. If the wood must be carved today, he carves. If the storm is coming, he prepares. If the roof leaks, he repairs it. If the community needs him, he responds. No questions, no internal debate, no emotional negotiation. And here's the part that should make you pause. He doesn't just force himself to do these things. He doesn't feel oppressed by the obligation. He doesn't resent the work. He draws identity from it. This is where Western thinking tends to misunderstand Eastern cultures. Duty is often portrayed as restrictive, suffocating, or joyless. But in Japanese worldview, duty is not a cage. It is a path. It gives your life shape, direction, and meaning. A person without duty is not free. They are lost. They drift. They collapse inward. They vanish into themselves. Another breadcrumb. The Japanese language has a term for people who float without purpose. Ukiyo, the floating world. Today, the word is associated with art, but originally it meant the life of a person who drifts without responsibility or anchor. Contrast that with giri, duty, the force that gives shape to your existence. Do you see the pattern forming? Let's layer in another piece. The Japanese didn't separate action from meaning. In fact, they believed that action creates meaning. It doesn't wait for it. There's a Zen teaching that captures this perfectly. Chop wood, carry water. That is enough. It doesn't say wait for motivation. It doesn't say find your passion. It doesn't say align with your energy. It says do the work and the meaning will reveal itself. But this raises an increasingly pressing question, one you might have felt swelling beneath the surface. If Japanese culture is built on duty, doesn't that make people emotionless? Doesn't that suppress individuality? Doesn't it crush personal desire? This is where the story begins bending towards something deeper, where the emotional landscape becomes more complex. Because here's the unexpected twist hidden in their psychology. The Japanese didn't suppress emotion, they organized it. They believed feelings were like weather, unpredictable, transient, often misleading, and therefore unfit to determine action. But they also believed feelings held truth, beauty, and humanity when placed in the proper order. Duty first, emotion second, action always. This structure freed them from emotional paralysis and allowed them to keep moving even in darkness, grief, or exhaustion. There's a historical anecdote about a samurai who continued practicing sword forms the day after losing a loved one. When asked how he could do something so heartless, he answered calmly, "Grief is real, but so is duty. If I allow sorrow to undo discipline, then sorrow becomes my master. I bow to my grief, but I do not kneel." That line is a doorway into Yamato Damashii. It hints at a spiritual engine, something far deeper than discipline or culture. An internal force that makes action possible even when motivation has completely evaporated. We're getting closer to the heart of the philosophy. You can feel it. The tension is rising. You're starting to sense the deeper system beneath everything. But the emotional twist, the part that will shift your entire understanding, comes next. The samurai were not disciplined because they were fearless. They were disciplined because they were terrified of something else entirely. And that something else is what makes Yamato Damashii more powerful than motivation could ever be. You've been told a lie your entire life, a beautifully packaged, socially celebrated lie. Motivation is what drives success. But here's the twist. The moment everything you've assumed up until now starts to crack. The Japanese didn't reject motivation because they were stronger. They rejected it because they understood something terrifying. Motivation protects you from confronting who you really are. Duty exposes you. This is the emotional turning point. The shift where everything begins to feel heavier, more intimate, more uncomfortable. Up until now, you've looked at motivation as a good thing. The spark, the push, the emotional booster that gets you started. But the Japanese saw something darker in it, something you don't notice until someone names it for you. Motivation lets you delay responsibility. Motivation lets you pretend the problem is emotional, not behavioral. Motivation lets you avoid the truth that you are capable of action even when you don't feel like acting. Motivation tells you, you will work when you feel ready. Duty tells you, you must work whether you feel ready or not. And this is where the real twist hits like a cold wind. Duty forces you to face the gap between your intentions and your behavior. Motivation hides it. That's why Yamato Damashii isn't about strength. It's about honesty. Brutal, unforgiving honesty about who you are when the warm glow of inspiration is stripped away. Let me show you something that illustrates this perfectly. There is a famous Japanese proverb. A man's character is revealed by what he does after he fails. Not what he does when he's motivated. Not what he does when he's praised. Not what he does when he's full of energy. What he does after the collapse. When the spark is gone. When the body is tired. When the mind is foggy. When nothing feels worth doing. Motivation is loud. Duty is silent. Motivation is exciting. Duty is steady. Motivation makes you feel good. Duty makes you become good. This is the twist. Motivation serves your ego. Duty serves your soul. And you can feel the difference, can't you? One makes you feel like a hero before you've done anything. The other requires you to act like one before you feel like one. Let's dig even deeper. For samurai, failure wasn't the moment you lost a battle. Failure was the moment you stopped moving forward, emotionally, mentally, spiritually. The true collapse wasn't external, it was internal. This is where the Japanese mindset becomes profoundly psychological. They believe that the greatest danger a person faces is not fear or pain or adversity. The greatest danger is emotional surrender. Not acting because you don't feel like it was seen not as laziness but as a kind of spiritual death. A moment where the self betrays itself. This belief didn't come from brutality, it came from clarity. The clarity that emotion-based living creates fragile people. Here comes the turning point you weren't expecting. Motivation collapses the moment life becomes heavy. Duty becomes strongest when life becomes heavy. Think about it. When you're heartbroken, does motivation help? When you're exhausted, does motivation appear? When you're scared, does motivation show up? When life breaks you, does motivation save you? It doesn't. It disappears. But duty stays. And here's where the twist widens into something deeper. Yamato Damashii isn't about obedience. It's about transcendence. It is the moment where you stop being controlled by the fluctuations of your inner world. It is the moment where you become someone your emotions must follow. It is the moment where fear loses power because you act anyway. It is the moment where inconsistency dies. Motivation asks you to wait. Duty asks you to rise. Yamato Damashii asks you to transcend. But this raises a haunting question. One that now sits at the center of everything. Why did the Japanese elevate duty above all else? What emotional truth did they see about human nature that the rest of the world ignored? The answer is darker and more profound than people expect. Because they discovered that a person who depends on motivation becomes enslaved by mood, and a person enslaved by mood cannot protect anyone, build anything, or survive hardship. So they built a culture, a psychology, a spirit that makes motivation unnecessary. This is the moment the story tilts. This is where Yamato Damashii becomes not just interesting but unsettling. Because it forces you to confront a question that's been waiting in the shadows. If your life depended on your ability to act without motivation, could you survive? And if not, how do you change that? The answer is coming, and it will not be what you expect. There is a moment, a quiet, private moment as to when you realize the truth you've been avoiding. You've built your life on motivation because it's the only thing that feels good. But here's the part no one warns you about. The more you rely on motivation, the weaker you become without it. And this is where the psychological tension begins to rise. Not in sudden shocks, but in slow, tightening spirals that force you to confront what Yamato Damashii truly demands. Let's peel back another layer. You've probably noticed something uncomfortable in yourself. You're capable of extraordinary work when you're inspired. But when the inspiration dies, when it always dies, you collapse, you wait, you stall, you lose momentum. You disappear into the fog of "I'll start tomorrow." This is the pattern that drains years from your life without you noticing. Now imagine this pattern magnified into a culture. If ancient Japan had lived like this, if farmers only worked when inspired, if craftsmen only shaped wood when in the mood, if warriors only trained when motivated, the entire society would have collapsed. That wasn't an option. So instead of building their lives around what feels good, they built them around what must be done. This is where the tension sharpens. You've been trained to obey your feelings. They were trained to obey their principles. You consult your emotions before acting. They consult their obligations. Your life bends with your mood. Theirs bends with their values. And slowly, painfully, the picture becomes clearer. You don't need more motivation. You need a different identity. Because here's the real escalation point. Your identity determines your consistency, not your emotions. Motivation says, I want to become that kind of person. Duty says, I am that kind of person. So I act accordingly. This difference is everything. Let me give you a subtle, unsettling example. In Japan, even the smallest, most repetitive tasks can become sacred. Sweeping a floor, preparing tea, arranging tools. These actions are done with precision, calmness, intention, not because the person feels inspired, but because the act itself is a reflection of their inner character. A thought that would paralyze most Western minds. Who I am is revealed in what I do, especially when I don't feel like doing it. Pause on that. Now feel the tension rising inside you, the internal resistance that whispers, "That's too strict. That's unrealistic. That's too much pressure. That's not how humans work." But the Japanese would say, that is exactly how humans work, unless we train them not to. This is the psychological twist that deepens the tension. Modern life has conditioned you to believe that discomfort signals something is wrong. Ancient Japanese life conditioned people to believe that discomfort signals something important. Not a danger, not a mistake, not a flaw, a call, a direction, a responsibility, a moment where the self is forged. Because here's the paradox. The moment you feel the least like acting is the moment your character is most visible. Samurai had a saying, "A man is not measured by his skill, but by the strength of his resolve when his heart wavers." That's Yamato Damashii, not stoicism, not coldness, not emotionlessness, but the ability to move with unwavering purpose even when your spirit trembles. Let's turn the tension up one more degree. You have goals, you have dreams, you have visions of who you want to become. But every one of those requires a version of you who does not rely on unstable emotional fuel. Every dream you have dies the moment you wait for motivation. Every ambition collapses the moment you depend on inspiration. Every potential future self suffocates under the weight of, "I don't feel like it." This is why Japanese duty-based psychology hits so hard. It exposes the fact that your goals may not be out of reach. You are. Your inconsistency, your emotional dependence, your mood-based decision-making. This isn't about discipline, it's about identity, and identity is the most powerful human force on earth. Here's the next escalation. In Japan, identity is built through behavior repeated daily, not through emotion felt intensely. If a person acts with honor every day, they are honorable. If they act responsibly every day, they are responsible. If they act consistently every day, they are consistent. Identity does not come from inside the mind. It emerges from the pattern of your actions. And here's the part that tightens the psychological pressure even more. You can act your way into a new identity, but you cannot feel your way into one. Once that truth lands, truly lands, there's no going back. Because now you understand why Yamato Damashii made motivation irrelevant. It replaces the unstable self with the inevitable self, the version of you who acts without permission from your feelings, the version of you who builds instead of waiting, the version of you who keeps moving even when broken, the version of you who rises even when empty, the version of you who cannot be stopped by mood, fear, or fatigue. And there is one more layer, one more tension-building truth, waiting to be revealed. Duty, when embraced fully, transforms into freedom. Duty is not easy. That's the first truth most people ignore when they hear about Yamato Damashii. It is relentless, it is uncompromising, and it doesn't negotiate with your feelings. Imagine waking every morning to a world that does not bend to your desires. The tasks are always there, the rice must be planted, the tools must be sharpened, the duties to family and community cannot be ignored, and you have no choice but to act, whether your heart is heavy, whether your body aches, whether your mind protests. This is the life the Japanese built their philosophy around. And in that world, motivation is meaningless. Motivation is fleeting. Motivation is a luxury you cannot afford. What carries you forward is something deeper, something that runs far below the level of mood or whim. The internalized code of duty. You can feel the tension tightening already, because when you realize this, you see the subtle tragedy of our modern lives. We have constructed a society where the signals that should push us forward, the alarms, the responsibilities, the obligations are muffled by comfort. We wait for permission from our emotions instead. We wait for motivation. And when it doesn't come, we collapse. Yamato Damashii offers something far more terrifying and liberating at the same time. It removes the safety net. It forces action without emotional approval. It asks you to face yourself in your rawest, most honest state. The quiet dread you've felt every time motivation failed, the unease of lying to yourself about your capabilities, the guilt of abandoned projects, all of it is stripped away once you embrace this mindset. You see clearly. There is no excuse. There is only duty. And yet, strangely, this clarity is freeing. The psychological tension escalates precisely because it is real. You are no longer at the mercy of whim. You are no longer a hostage to feeling. You are accountable to something stronger. Your identity itself becomes your engine. You act, and in acting, you build the person capable of acting even in despair. Let's take a closer look at how this tension manifests in the small, almost imperceptible details. The samurai did not rise because he was inspired. He rose because that was what the morning required. The craftsman did not carve because he felt like it. He carved because each precise cut reflected the integrity of his life. The farmer did not plant because the sun lifted his spirits. He planted because the earth demanded it, rain or shine. Each instance is small. Each act seems ordinary, but they accumulate, quietly building a life unshakable by the storms that motivation could never withstand. And this is where your mind begins to push back. You sense the pressure building. This is too extreme. I can't live like that. That's impossible. Exactly. That's why it's powerful. Because the human mind resists change, especially radical internal change. Yamato Damashii is not an easy philosophy to adopt. It's a challenge to the very framework of identity we've been raised to believe in. It forces confrontation with the parts of ourselves we've hidden, ignored, or excused away. Yet, paradoxically, this is also where the psychological beauty emerges. Each act of duty, each decision made without emotional prompting gradually rewires your brain. You begin to understand that freedom is not the absence of obligation. It is the mastery of self through unwavering adherence to what must be done. The tension, the tightness you feel when you face discomfort without the comfort of motivation, begins to transform into power. Here's the subtle but crucial psychological point. Human beings are wired to respond to consequences. Yamato Damashii exploits that wiring not through fear but through identity alignment. Each time you act out of duty, you reinforce a version of yourself that cannot be swayed by whim or mood. Motivation is temporary, duty is permanent. Identity built on repeated duty is impervious. And now the tension hits its apex. You see the stakes clearly, your dreams, your goals, your sense of purpose, everything you've built on the fragile flame of motivation is at risk. Every hesitation, every surrender to emotion, every delay chips away at what could have been. But here comes the turning moment toward the internal soft climax. You realize the strange, counterintuitive truth. By removing reliance on motivation, you gain something far greater. A stillness, a clarity, a certainty. You stop negotiating with your mind. You stop waiting for the perfect moment. You stop collapsing when you feel tired or uninspired. You simply act. And in acting, you are alive in a way that waiting for motivation could never allow. The tension you've been feeling, the dread, the uncertainty, the heaviness of confronting your flaws is not punishment. It is the crucible of growth. It is the pressure that forges the version of yourself capable of enduring hardship without relying on emotional highs. It is the emergence of a person whose actions define them, not their feelings. This is the essence of Yamato Damashii, an internal engine fueled by identity and duty, impervious to the fragility of emotion. And once you feel that shift, once the psychological tension transforms into understanding, you begin to see that your life can no longer be dictated by fleeting highs. Motivation is optional, duty is inevitable, and for the first time, the path forward is no longer a question of if I feel like it, but a matter of I must act, and I will. Here it comes. The moment you've been moving toward through the tension, the breadcrumbs, and the slow burn realization. It is not loud. It is not dramatic. There is no applause, no rush, no external validation. It is entirely internal. Yet its weight is immense, almost staggering. You realize that everything you've been chasing, motivation, inspiration, excitement, emotional highs, was never meant to be the driver of your life. They were illusions, sparks meant to ignite, never sustain. And in that realization, the internal climax begins. You understand what actually matters. Duty, obligation, the silent, relentless engine that pushes you forward when everything else fails. For centuries, the Japanese cultivated Yamato Damashii not as a strategy, but as a survival mechanism, a spiritual backbone, a life philosophy. The samurai did not train out of love for the sword. The farmer did not rise with the sun out of joy for the fields. The artisan did not carve endlessly for inspiration. They acted because their identity depended on it. They acted because their duty demanded it. And now, suddenly, this concept resonates on a deeply personal level. You see yourself in those carpenters, samurai, and farmers, not literally, of course, but spiritually. You see the version of yourself you could become, someone who does not pause, someone who does not collapse under fleeting emotions, someone who moves forward because the self has been forged into action itself. This realization is subtle yet electrifying. It is quiet, but it shakes the very foundation of your internal narrative. No longer is success a question of mood, energy, or fleeting drive. Success becomes a matter of identity. Your actions define who you are, and your duty defines the actions you must take. Feel it in your mind, the sense of freedom that comes not from following desire, but from surrendering to necessity. Because paradoxically, Yamato Damashii does not enslave you. It liberates you. It frees you from the tyranny of emotional volatility. It gives your life a shape, a rhythm, a certainty. Even when your mind screams to stop, the part of you anchored in duty moves. Even when your body aches, even when your heart resists, you act. This is the emotional peak, the internal crescendo. You are no longer negotiating with yourself. You are no longer waiting for conditions to feel right. You are not relying on sparks, highs, or transient energy. You are acting because that is who you have become. And in that action, the fear, the hesitation, and the guilt that plagued you evaporate. You realize that the person who collapses under lost motivation was never truly you. They were a construct of habits and reliance on emotion. The real self, the durable self, the Yamato Damashii self, is forged through repeated action in alignment with duty. A moment of reflection hits. every failure, every pause, every time you waited for motivation. It was a lesson in disguise. It taught you the fragility of reliance on emotion. And now, through this awareness, you are standing at the threshold of a profound transformation. You understand that life does not wait for inspiration. Life does not reward feelings. Life rewards action, consistency, and the quiet, relentless adherence to duty. And this realization reframes your entire understanding of struggle, effort, and personal growth. Here's the subtle, almost invisible but deeply powerful final point of the climax. Yamato Damashii does not remove suffering. It does not make life easier. It does not guarantee success. What it does is far more profound. It ensures that you do not collapse under the weight of suffering. It guarantees that regardless of circumstances, your actions remain consistent. It allows you to endure hardship with clarity and integrity. It transforms the chaos of emotional turbulence into structured, unstoppable forward motion. In this quiet internal apex, you feel the full weight of the philosophy settling inside you. Motivation was a lie. Duty is the truth. And identity forged in duty is unstoppable. You are no longer waiting for your feelings to catch up to your ambitions. You are no longer negotiating with your own internal chaos. You are no longer hostage to fleeting energy or temporary excitement. You are moving because you are duty itself. And that is the moment when everything changes, not externally, not in flashy transformations, not in sudden leaps, but internally, irrevocably, fundamentally. You are no longer someone who relies on motivation. You are someone who embodies Yamato Damashii. Now the tension has subsided. The fire of revelation has burned through, leaving a still warmth in its place. You sit with it quietly, and for the first time you notice the subtle difference in your breathing, the lightness behind your eyes, the sense of inner clarity. The lesson is no longer abstract. It is embedded in the rhythm of your thoughts, in the architecture of your identity. You reflect on your life, tracing the path of repeated failures, the moments you felt paralyzed by a lack of motivation, the guilt and frustration that piled up silently in the corners of your mind. You realize now that none of those moments were caused by weakness, laziness, or lack of talent. They were caused by reliance on something that was never meant to sustain you. Fleeting emotion. And yet there is no bitterness in this realization, only clarity. You see that the Japanese philosophy you've been exploring, Yamato Damashii, is not a judgment on your past. It is a blueprint for the future. It offers a map out of the chaos, showing you how to structure your life so that your actions and not your moods define you. You think about the countless ordinary acts around you, the small, repetitive tasks you often neglect. Cleaning, organizing, planning, learning, practicing, showing up. In the old framework of motivation, these acts often feel meaningless unless infused with emotional energy. But now, under the lens of Yamato Damashii, they take on new power. They are not just chores. They are statements of identity. They are the building blocks of a self that cannot be swayed by fleeting feelings. There is also a subtle, almost paradoxical freedom in this philosophy. At first glance, duty may feel like a constraint, a chain you must drag behind you. But in truth, it is liberating. Once your life is structured around the inevitability of action, once you internalize that doing what must be done is who you are no longer hostage to the unpredictable chaos of mood or desire. You are free because your power does not depend on circumstance. You are free because your essence is already aligned with action. You remember the samurai, the carpenter, the farmer. Their lives were simple yet profoundly anchored. Their actions were not glamorous, but they were deliberate, and in their deliberation lies a lesson for modern life. Ordinary moments, executed with consistency and responsibility, accumulate into a life of unshakable strength. Your greatness does not arrive in flashes of inspiration. It emerges from the quiet, steady insistence of doing what must be done. As you sit with this understanding, a question lingers, gentle but persistent. How can you integrate this into your life starting today? The answer is deceptively simple. Start with one act of duty, one action completed regardless of how you feel, one commitment kept even when you are exhausted, distracted, or uninspired, one small piece of integrity exercised consistently. Then repeat, and then repeat again. Over time, these acts accumulate, reshaping your identity from the inside out. You are no longer chasing motivation. You are becoming Yamato Damashii. And then the final thought, the one that resonates long after the reading ends. The moment you stop waiting for motivation, the moment you stop relying on feeling to dictate action, you step into a different plane of self-mastery. You discover a part of yourself that was always there, dormant, waiting to be activated not by sparks but by steadfast action. You find freedom in duty. You find clarity in responsibility. You find strength in consistency. This is the quiet landing, the reflective pause after the crescendo. It is not about applause, external recognition, or dramatic transformation. It is about internal alignment, about a deep, abiding sense that no matter what storms may come, you have built the inner scaffolding to withstand them. You have replaced the fragility of fleeting motivation with the durability of identity forged through duty. And as you close your eyes and take a deep breath, you understand it fully. This is not a temporary fix. This is not another self-help gimmick. This is a philosophy centuries in the making, tested in the crucible of history, and alive today in every person who has learned to act even when feeling powerless. This is Yamato Damashii, and it is now, quietly but irrevocably, a part of you.